August was actually a very successful reading month for me. Well, at least the second half. My name is Taylor Rose, and welcome back to my channel where we talk about everything reading and writing. So this month was actually really successful. I had 0 DNFs, which was nice. If you remember from July, I started the Stormlight Archives by Brandon Sanderson, with every book being absolutely gigantic. I powered through 2.5 of the books in July and then was just absolutely exhausted. The first book that I finished in August was Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson. That is the 3rd book in the Stormlight Archives. It was originally published in 2017. Has a 4.61 rating on Goodreads with over 22,000 reviews and 333,000 ratings. I did ultimately like Oathbringer better than the second book, Words of Radiance. Felt about kind of the same for it as I did for The Way of Kings, which was the first book. Essentially, what is happening in this book is that, you know, at the end of the previous book, the Everstorm was awakened. So in this book, they're really dealing with the aftermath of the Everstorm existing at all. You know, since basically this world is hit by just a constantly circulating storm. So here's a new one that's even worse. As I mentioned before, this one does have flashbacks from Dalinar's point of view. And while previously he was kind of one of my favorite characters, in this book, you learn that he was just a road ragey meathead. And it was really disappointing. Like, I get the point. It's like he developed as a person and became a good guy, but it was just really painful having to slog through every single chapter that was one of his flashbacks. I felt like Shallan had a lot of really good character growth in this one that kind of explained why she was so freaking erratic in the previous book, but I don't know. Overall, I still don't know how I feel about her. You learn a lot more about the Spren in this book, which I'm not really sure why I didn't see it coming, but the fact that they have their own little society just kind of really caught me off guard. But overall, not a bad read. I am going to be taking a break, though. I mean, I took a break most of this month. I kind of spent the first 2 weeks of August slogging through this because I was just like emotionally tired. Maybe in September, I'll get up the energy to start the 4th book, Rhythm of War, but don't hold your breath. To recuperate, the 2nd book I finished was A Holy Maiden's Guide to Getting Kidnapped by Katie Nyquist. This book has a 4.0 rating with 83 reviews and 112 ratings. I did receive the audiobook as a NetGalley arc, but the book was actually published back in June, so it is available. Overall, I had a lot of fun. I really liked the choice of narrator, so the voice actor for the audiobook. So this book is about a holy maiden named Isabel who lives in kind of a, at least how I interpreted it, as like a city state, essentially run by cardinals. So like there's religious control over the city, and her gift, her power, is that she can heal any wound, but it takes a day of her life. So the book starts off with Isabel telling the reader that she only has 45 days left to live because every day she is healing people under the direction of the head cardinal Zhang, who she has basically entered into a life oath with, where if she breaks the life oath, she will die. Never mind that Cardinal Zhang is planning on sacrificing her anyways. So you follow Isabel as she is kind of trying to figure out how to get out of this. She has an extremely dedicated bodyguard, Alzira, who is so funny. She was my favorite character. I loved her. She's so dedicated to Isabel to like an insane degree. It gets them into a lot of trouble sometimes. Isabel runs into this mysterious man who immediately reveals himself to be Dark Lord Kane, an invading commander, basically, who has his army parked outside the city. there's just a lot going on in this story. So you're balancing Isabel's desire to like get out of this life oath, her budding relationship with Dark Lord Cain, Dark Lord Cain's whole mission, like why he's there. There's like the internal city politics where different religions are wrestling for power. Meanwhile, Isabel's also trying to use her power for good while kind of gaming the system. Obviously, you know, there's a lot of sexism, slavery, racism, poverty. So she's like trying to basically balance a bunch of plates while trying not to offend anybody. But in order to do that, she has to like play along with a lot of the negative stereotypes that are being assigned to her, A, as a woman, B, as a mixed race person in this society. I really liked her character. I had a lot of fun with her because she's really sassy and manages to get what she wants. Obviously, this is a romance. I did really like how Cain treated Isabel, like their relationship I really liked. But if I'm being honest, I did not like Cain as a person. He came off very much, he got what he wants and he doesn't really care about other people. You know, maybe it's possible I missed some things since I was just listening to the audiobook, but it kind of felt like we're being told that, but actually he's this great person when he didn't. He just always seemed to kind of be making fun of Isabel for caring about the poverty and the refugees and all these issues, when really, given his backstory, he probably should have cared a lot more. Like, he's supposed to be this like golden retriever type boyfriend, but it came off a little like either he's just really stupid or actually a jerk with a nice veneer, if that makes sense. One thing that I noticed in a lot of the reviews on Goodreads is that people said that this book took forever. Like, it just felt like it took so much time. I didn't have that issue personally because I was listening to the audiobook on like 3.5 times speed. Because while the narrator does a really good job embodying the characters, she is pretty slow. So I personally didn't really have any issues with the pacing or anything, but I did feel like a lot of the plot lines were kind of like dealt with really shallowly, and Isabel, the main character, put up with a lot of things that just based off her personality, I don't think she actually would have. But, you know, otherwise, it was cute, a fun little ride. Fair warning, it is trying to be a little kinky. Isabel is supposed to be like a dominatrix. I didn't really think like anything that happened really lived up to her descriptions of herself and her preferences. And I saw that a lot in the Goodreads reviews also afterwards. But, you know, for me, it was enough. I was really not interested in seeing anymore, but it just made me laugh when Isabel was talking about like how extreme she liked things and then nothing extreme ever happened. But, you know, you do you. The third book I read was also an arc from NetGalley. It was the entirely true story of the fantastical mesmerist Nora Gray, written by Kathleen Kaufman. It has also already been released. It was released in July. I think both of these I was approved after the publication date, so it's not like I was waiting forever to read the book or anything. So this one was definitely very different vibes to the previous two. It is set in the early 20th century, so like 1901, 1902-ish, and it follows Nora Gray. It starts off and she is a teenager in Scotland who is traveling the countryside with her father, performing tarot card readings and like seances. However, they're fake seances. She's a scammer. But she is quickly picked up by a group of spiritualists who are like totally invested and convinced that like she has supernatural powers. The story is like her journey through learning about and developing her powers, and also explores potentially like where her powers came from. So there are two main POV characters, Nora being the main one, but then there's also a girl named Lottie. Her scenes are actually from the 1860s. It was really interesting seeing how the two stories come together. I did feel like the first 30% of this book was extremely slow, but the last 30%, I couldn't put the book down. So it kind of balanced out. I will say that I definitely preferred Lottie's POV to Nora's. Nora's ultimately felt pretty flat. There wasn't very much interiority for her. Most of her thoughts were stated, like literally stated in dialogue, or were more vague, just notations of other people's actions. Versus when we are in Lottie's point of view, she has a lot more depth and thought going on. Perhaps because she's grieving. She's a young widow who was pregnant when her husband died. So she's having to navigate, like, I'm going to have to provide for this kid. I lost my husband. The world sucks for single women. She's Scottish, but she had been moved to Wales to be with her husband. So she's like, I'm not even in my home country. What am I going to do? Well, I guess arguably you could say that like Lottie had a lot more room to stretch her wings. It is an alternative history fantasy. It is grounded in events that did happen, but there's like magical twists and extra people involved in these historical events. So currently this book has a 3.95 rating with almost 500 ratings and over 250 reviews. I think I gave it like a 3.5 star. If Nora's point of view had been a little, if it had more interiority for the character and then more descriptions of her surroundings, it just felt less than Lottie's POV. Next, I read A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed. It has a 3.72 with almost 90,000 ratings and 20,000 reviews. I personally really loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. I was obsessed. I'm still thinking about it. It's like a dark academia YA, yeah, with like supernatural folklore elements. I loved it. Maybe I'm just a sucker. I don't know. In A Study in Drowning, you follow the main character, Effie Sayre, as she travels from her university to a very distant rural estate where she has been chosen to redesign the mansion of a recently deceased national treasure author, Mesmerist. So she goes there to meet his son, redesign the house, and, you know, learn more about her favorite author. She's obsessed with this guy. You learn that in this world, women are not allowed to study literature. She was forced to become an architecture major, and she is the only girl in the architecture college. There's a lot of exploration about sexism, specifically in academia. There were a few things that I saw in a bunch of reviews that I kind of just like, I felt like they didn't actually pay attention to the plot. I don't know, that sounds really bad. If you intend on reading this book, probably stop listening to me here and jump ahead to me being done with this. But essentially, a lot of people complain that Effie is frequently described as being so beautiful. And I will admit, at first, I was like, this is over the top. But as you continue reading, it was so obvious to me. The people who are calling her so beautiful and making these like aggressive advances on her are doing so because they're being controlled by the antagonist. And it is explicitly spelled out by a side character at the end. Yeah, the antagonist basically infiltrated all these people's minds and was controlling them because they were weak-willed men. So it was like every single person who made inappropriate advances towards Effie were adult men. The conversation would start out pretty normally, and then all of a sudden they just get really intensely into her and like touching her and stuff. At the beginning, there were a few instances where like college-aged boys made advances on her, but you learn through the story that basically she was caught hooking up with a professor. It was against her will, but it is being spread around through rumors that she is easy and will mess around with anybody, apparently. So it's like, yeah, these teenage boys are like, oh, I hear you put out, basically. Like they're trying to get in on the action because they think they can. Versus these other adult male characters who are like being extremely predatory and demonstrating like the same physical behaviors and saying the same things. And you might be wondering like, why in the world is that a plot point, blah, blah, blah. The antagonist who is controlling these people was in love, married a woman who she is explicitly described as looking like in the final chapter. And it's kind of hinted via her hair color and her eye color throughout the book. She looks like this other person. So it was just like, that's why the antagonist is in love with her, because she's like quintessentially his type. My favorite book ever, Deathless, does the same thing. Koschei the Deathless, who is the Tsar of Death in Russian folklore, he replays the same story over and over by taking another girl. He just keeps taking girls with the same name who look the same. They're all skinny blonde girls who eventually fall in love with the same type of guy, and the same story repeating itself over and over until you get Maria Morevna, who is not a Vasilisa. She's different. And everyone's like, ooh, you're not like all his other wives. So maybe that's why I liked this book or picked up on that. Plus, I thought the romance was really cute. A lot of people thought that her love interest, Preston, was really boring. I don't know. He was a crotchety little academic. Another complaint that I saw a lot in the reviews was that Effie is racist. And I'm not arguing that she isn't. She does say some pretty mean things to Preston. But I think in the context of the world, it makes more sense. Like, so basically the country where Effie's from, Lear, is at war with another country, and that's where Preston is from. She later learned that he is actually half Lyrian. His mother's from Lear, moved to the other country to marry his father, but they've been at war since before either of them were born. So it's like decades of war. There's literally a wall separating the countries because of this. And while her country has been like dominating the war, now there's concern that like, oh, maybe we're losing our grip and the other side's gonna win. I don't find it strange that she has these negative opinions about the opposite side of the war. Like, war propaganda is inherent to wars. Is it good? Is it a good thing? No. Do I agree with war? Definitely not. But this is a book. Just personally, to me, it makes sense that, of course, this country that's been at war for decades is being indoctrinated with propaganda against the other side. Nobody wants to fight their brother or a culture they think is like them. I mean, if you lived through the early 2000s, Islamophobia was and is still rampant. While I do think more could have been done to address it, she does apologize to Preston and basically admits part of the reason she was so aggressive to him at all is because, you know, even though he is a foreigner, he was allowed to go to the college she wanted to go to, where they study their national culture. Like, she's not being allowed to engage academically with her own culture because she's a woman. Meanwhile, this dude can just waltz in from another country and, like, even though they're at war and everyone hates his country, it's totally fine for him to come in here and take her spot, essentially, is like obviously how she's viewing the situation. I also think it was pretty clear from the release of this book that it's supposed to be a duology. So I'm imagining that the second book is going to close up this storyline. This book takes place over, I think, 6 weeks, and you really are only seeing 2 of those weeks. There's like a flash forward, 2 weeks, and then another flash forward. So there certainly wasn't enough time being covered to really address any of those things in a satisfactory manner. Because I saw several reviews also saying the war doesn't play any role in the part. Like, yeah, the book takes place over 2 weeks. What do you want to happen? You want this 18-year-old girl to just like magically in the war? No. Like, that's not the focus of this book. There are plenty of YA books that focus on ending a war or uncovering the truth behind a war or whatever, but that isn't this book. Either way, I am super excited to read the second book. I am still waiting for it on Libby. I might just end up buying it because there's about, I think, 12 weeks still. So the second book is A Theory of Dreaming, and I was actually sent the arc for the final novella. It's kind of like bonus content and like an epilogue sort of, called An Archive of Romance. I am waiting to read that until I get A Theory of Dreaming. The novella is supposed to come out in December, so I have some time. After I finished up A Theory in Dreaming, I went ahead and read my 5th book for the month, The Wolf and the Woodsman, also by Ava Reed. This is her first book. It has a 3.5 rating with 30,000 ratings and around 6,000 reviews. It wasn't as good as A Study in Dreaming. You can tell this was an earlier work by her. Essentially, this story follows Evika, who is a pagan wolf girl living in a little village in the woods. And once every 2 or 3 years, the woodsmen come and take one of the girls because they have magical powers. So, of course, this year the woodsmen come and who do they take? Evika. Except, plot twist, she is only going because they want the seer, and the village doesn't want to let the seer go. So they force Evika to take her place, even though Evika does not have any magical powers. So she's sent off with these woodsmen, trying to hide the fact she is not actually the girl that they want. And pretty quickly it veers off of this. And then the first 50% took an eternity. It felt like twice as long as it actually was. I mean, this book's only 427 pages. So it felt like I read 400 pages, but by the time I got to the 50% mark. But then the last 50% is like all the plot. And my main issues with this were the physical descriptions were really lacking. Almost any time movement is being described, it's done in such a vague way, or it's worded in a way that implies one thing, but as the scene goes on, you realize it's actually a different setup, that I just found really confusing. If you like books with a lot of folklore interwoven into the story, you'd probably like this one. It had a ton of like fables and tales being told, but I didn't feel like it really extended to the world building. So this book is meant to be like ancient Hungary, basically, with conflict between the Christians and the Jewish people living there at the time, plus the pagans. But for all these fairy tales that are being told, fit with the world building very much. There are multiple monster attacks. They don't discuss the monsters. Where did the monsters come from? What do they mean? Why are they here? Why did they attack us? None of that. It's just like a monster pops out, they fight, and the monster's gone. And then they just move on. Like there's no discussion, which I feel like most books like this with like a really strong folklore vibe. You know, my favorite, Deathless by Catherine Vellante, Uprooted, or Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik, countless others. What is happening in the world is tied to that folklore, versus here it felt like the folklore and the world building were two entirely separate entities, if that makes sense. So it just made what's happening feel really convenient. It kind of felt like each plot point was just like a separate thing happening. And then the last half of the book is trying to like cobble together a plot that is actually like interwoven. I did really like the love interest Gaspar because he's really gloomy and like he kind of does like a lot of self-flagellation. I did think that the depiction of Christianity in this was a little off. I mean, unless I misunderstood something, I read an interview from Ava Reed about the book, and I believe she is of Jewish descent. So she was really interested in exploring like the historical plight that they faced often throughout history, being kicked out of various places. But so like I felt like that part of the story, the Yehui, felt very respectful and realistic to like what the Jewish faith is. But the representation of Christianity was like everyone's cutting themselves, and like I totally get it. Like Christianity has done some pretty heinous stuff throughout history and has been very aggressive against out groups and other religions and that sort of thing, but it's just the vibes were off. If you've read the Winter Night trilogy, starting with The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden, I think she had a much more balanced depiction of the good and bad sides of Christianity in her story, in its conflict with like the native Rus culture. I liked the overall image that I could tell Reed was trying to make, but I don't think it was executed to its best extent possible. I know. You know, overall, I finished 5 books and I enjoyed all of them, so that's good. As for September, I have the arc for The Works of Vermin by Kieran Inez that is being published in October. So I've been trying to work through it. I hit about 25%, and then because I started it back when I was also doing Stormlight Archives. So I think I'm going to start over and actually finish it. I was also just approved for the arc of The Everlasting by Alex E. Harrow, and I'm super excited for this. I watched Reads with Rachel's video on why she loved this book, so super excited. It's also due for publication in October, so neither of those books are out yet. I plan to finish them soon. Well, that was August. Have you read any of these books, and what did you think about them? Is there something else you think I should read? Well, that's all for now. I will see you next time.